Alright, I just want to point out before I start here that this is my 6th or 7th take doing this entire video because I couldn't get the sound right because I had my microphone facing backwards each time. Welcome back, LeftTube, to another hastily written late night rant. So recently, David Pakman had Democratic presidential candidate Andrew Yang on his show for the second time to challenge him a bit further on some of his policy stances. Hashtag Yang Gang. Now, Michael Brooks brought up some pretty powerful criticisms of Yang's pro-capitalist technocratic outlook, which I'll link to in the description. But here in this interview, I think he does a pretty good job of defending his views. What I want to point out here, though, is the section where they discuss the topic of education. Something I've been saying and thinking for years and years and years.
You know what's really interesting, David, is that if you look at like the heritage of our university system, it was not meant to get people jobs.
Right.
It's like it was actually meant to educate the population. And a lot of liberal arts education is built upon this, where like the expectation wasn't that like, oh, after you get this degree, you're going to go make a mint. It was to try and educate a population for citizenship and leadership in various ways. We've introduced the economic rationale a bit late in the day. So if, you know, in an ideal world, people would, and this dates me a little bit, but there was a point when people were choosing college majors based upon their interests.
That's shocking. Who would ever do that?
No, I know, there was, and unfortunately now we live in an era of such economic stress and duress that now everyone's like, oh, like we got to make college pay. We got to make college pay. If you major in that, then you're an idiot. Like blah blah blah. And I'm optimistic that taking the economic boot off of people's throats through the freedom dividend of $1,000 a month before, during, and after college might help change our educational culture in very positive ways.
Yeah, I mean, however you do it, and we might disagree about how to do it, making it so that the cost of college is less burdensome, either through the universal basic income, making college less expensive, whatever the point is, people will be better able to make the decisions that are actually decisions they want to make in terms of what their lives look like, rather than decisions that are sort of forced upon them by the economic circumstances. And it's hard to disagree that's a good thing.
Now, whatever you think of his actual education policy, he really drives home the point that needs to be made. Everyone and their dog has encountered one of these pro-capitalist, edgelord morons who chastises the entire idea of liberal arts degrees in universities. You'll often hear them talking about how dumb it is to spend so much money getting a degree in feminist dance therapy, when what we need is plumbers and electricians. Well, if it's so damn logical, then why are people still studying the liberal arts? Is it just because we're all just brainwashed into thinking we need to go to college? Or is it maybe, sometimes, because young adults actually want to become knowledgeable and intelligent leaders, citizens, and thinkers who want to create, discover, invent, and research things that will benefit everyone, not just themselves? Crazy concept, I know. Sort of like, the publicly funded development of every single piece of technology in an iPhone. You know, communist stuff like that.
Touchscreens were developed by government enterprises in Britain and by CERN. GPS and the Soviet equivalent GLONASS were developed by the militaries of the US and the USSR respectively. Microchips, without which your phone wouldn't work, was also a government project. Image sensors that allow you to take great photos with your phone or DSLR, accelerometers found in your phone and in video game consoles like the Wii, satellites, which are needed for practically everything nowadays, the internet, barcodes, the Doppler radar used for predicting weather, vaccines, including the recent lung cancer vaccine developed by Cuba, green energy sources like wind power. Even all the background work for Google was done through government funding. In fact, the economist Mariana Mazzucato from the University of Sussex states that every major technological change in recent years traces most of its funding back to the state. Even early-stage private sector venture capitalists come in much, much later, after the big breakthroughs have been already made. Adding on to this, a recent article from Scientific American stated that without government support, most basic scientific research will never happen. Innovation has happened not due to capitalism, but in spite of it.
People want to push the boundaries of what's possible, and not be limited to creating whatever drug Pfizer decides will be profitable that year. The seemingly irrational attraction to the university comes down to the fundamental nature of human curiosity and freedom. University offers near infinite domains of knowledge in which to explore and play. On the other hand, taking an electrician apprenticeship straight out of high school offers monetary prosperity and security, but all but shuts the door on this most basic human desire. Now, you can actually make a decent argument for people being socialized into thinking they need to get a university degree to achieve success, especially in our culture. The data certainly still skews that way in terms of lifetime income earned, but it is true too that too many people who don't really belong in university are giving it the old college try. Some 50% of university students don't finish within 6 years, and most of those don't finish at all. But why is that? Well, capitalism, and particularly neoliberal capitalism, intensifies the competition between humans for the few spots at the top of the hierarchy. Job insecurity, a shrinking middle class, and rising wealth inequality drive this mentality of status achievement at all costs, to the point where 17-year-olds are pushed to choose a field of study with little thought of the rationality of that choice given the current job market under capitalism. This is exactly the same impetus for helicopter parenting, and we know that's not good for anyone. Humans that live in an economic system that makes them anxious about the future make decisions that reflect that anxiety, and often irrational ones. It's the socioeconomic system that's driving this rush to the universities. And it's that system that drives clueless 17-year-olds to choose a path of education that they can funnel into a single career path over their entire lifetime. You know, for efficiency. Like workers on an assembly line with divided tasks, under capitalism, our work is highly specialized and boxed into a very narrow range of possibilities. You know, for efficiency. That's not to mention the entire marketing of university as the only key to success, but that's low-hanging fruit. On the other hand, the whole point of university is to create citizens that are capable of maintaining democracy. And if you look at the US, UK, or Ontario, we're not exactly doing so great in that department. The economic pressure of capitalism is precisely what makes us not free to pursue the kind of lives we want to live. This is why it's so patently absurd when right-wing morons claim capitalism promotes freedom. So goddamn fucking stupid. I'm not saying we ought to live in a world where everyone goes to university. That doesn't work. Clearly, it's not for everyone, nor should it be. Countries like Switzerland do a fantastic job of siphoning students into a mix of trade schools and universities, because the government is actively involved in the process of sorting people out and sending them places that best fit their interests and skills. Canada, on the other hand, is one of the world's worst, because we don't even have a federal ministry of education. The point here is not just to shit on Canada for being a total mess, although I am quite happy to do this. The point is that while funneling students into narrowly defined career paths to suit the specific needs of the economy may be good for capitalism and the state, it's much less clear that this is any good for actual humans.
My students, they're all there to get a job. They're not all there to learn, which is a great perversion of what the university is. Because I really think that this again comes back to the centrality of consumption, to the Laban's philosophy, the philosophy of life, of how Americans were raised to live in the world, where consumption is really the center, as opposed to, for example, creativity. I think I want to be careful, which I think a lot of Marxists have done throughout history, which is to fetishize work in and of itself, right? And I think we always have to be, careful about that, because my ideal would be a post-work, Marx says this, a post-work society where like human creativity and human flourishing is the goal, as opposed to work in and of itself. And I think that should be the goal.
That's what Marx talks like very specifically, like in the German ideology, right? When he says, like, he points this out very clearly when he says, what, fish in the morning, right, work a little bit in the afternoon and criticize after dinner.
Without ever being a fisher or worker or criticizer.
Exactly.
Right.
And it's like moving away from, being able to participate in the world without having to be your sole occupation. And just one more thing is that a person who I look up to as like sort of like my socialist idol is Paul Robeson, who I just found to be an amazing human being, a football star, a singer, a lawyer. And that's the kind of person that, like, when I want to say...
Graduate of Rutgers University.
Yeah, that is
Yes.
true. It's like when I say, it's like, well, what kind of person do you want socialism to produce? It's like, I want to see Paul Robeson, and Paul Robeson was somebody who was produced through struggle for socialism.
So it's kind of pointless to blame individuals for making choices you don't like under neoliberal capitalism. You classical liberals, conservatives, and libertarians claim to love freedom so much. Well, these kids are exercising their freedom by following where their interests lead them. And here you are, mocking them for doing the very thing you claim to promote.
Get those nerds! Nerd! Nerd!
Here's an example of what I mean. Popular conservative YouTube dumpster fire, PragerU, has a video literally telling its viewers, don't follow your passion. It's like they're not even trying anymore. It's as if they've decided that continuing the lie is just not worth the effort. And so what? It's not like you really have a choice in the matter anyway. Conform or perish is apparently the only kind of inspirational life advice you're going to get out of these people.
What do you mean, you people?
Come on, guys. You're getting lazy. You can do better than this. You're capitalism. This is kinda your whole thing. But I digress. So, my bootlicking friends, your beef isn't really with students making irrational decisions. Your beef is with a system that's totally incompatible with human nature and transforms work from something that gives your life purpose and meaning to a miserable necessity that you just have to endure. Well, that's not completely true. Capitalism does map on pretty well to one aspect of human nature: greed! Out of all the human qualities to base our entire socioeconomic system around, that's the one we went with. Nailed it. But maybe there's another beef you have. Maybe you're a little butthurt that you feel kinda dumb around people with university degrees or anyone who's read a book. Or maybe you're butthurt because you chose the safe path in life. Those cuck liberal arts students are all following their passion. What are you doing? Maybe you've got a secure but mindless 9-to-5 job that makes you dead inside, but you're okay with it. You're doing alright. I believe you. If we let these male brains have their way, we'd live in a world where everyone goes to college purely to study for one well-defined career path, like the trades, law clerk, police foundations, fitness and health promotion. One task equals one job. Now, there's nothing wrong with these programs, but the atomization of skills and competence creates a world where no one but a tiny minority of elites has any broad understanding of the world and how it works. And conveniently for those elites, this is also a world where no one is intellectually equipped to question or challenge the status quo, the one that keeps them comfortable, and the one that keeps you in your position as a temporarily embarrassed millionaire. One day you'll get there. Instead, in this dystopia that you seem to want to bring about, each individual is pigeonholed into their spot within the machine, and our only purpose as individuals in this machine is to keep greasing the wheels. It's a capitalist wet dream, a nation of distracted, illiterate, bootlicking worker bees, instead of a nation of politically engaged citizens. Even the American founders recognized this problem. Well, except James Madison. That guy was a complete dickhead. So, your uncle posting all these dumb anti-left memes all day long? Yeah. $100 says he has no formal education in the social sciences, humanities, or liberal arts. And again, you don't need these to be smart, but they are your armor if you have them. Your uncle, though, he reads the Toronto Sun, watches Fox News, and follows right-wing pages on social media. So he thinks he's tuned in, but he not. What he's actually done is turn himself into a tool of his own stagnation and depression. So, nailed it, uncle. What about a healthy society? Well, a healthy society invests in builders, thinkers, clerics, nurses, leaders, midwives, tradesmen, homemakers, athletes, academics, inventors, and artists, and turns them loose to fail, succeed, and master their crafts in whatever way they see fit. And most importantly, they're able to do this free from the crushing burden of sales targets, financial stress, and the profit motive. An unhealthy society pushes people into work they don't enjoy to fill the spots for which the socioeconomic system has the greatest demand, while simultaneously stripping away the incentives and security necessary in order for one to follow one's true passion. In capitalism, those spots at the top are always the ones that generate the most wealth. Unlike a sane society where the most prolific leaders and thinkers are held in the highest regard and wield the greatest influence. Wealth generation is only one type of job, and yet it's the only one the system cares about. It also happens to be the most soul-destroying, especially up at the tippy top. Ever wonder why so many Wall Street traders and bankers quit their 6- and 7-figure jobs at 35 to become feminist dance therapists? Because capitalism isn't human. It's a system imposed upon us that does not fit our nature in any way. A healthy society uses its technology, innovation, and resources to free humans to work on whatever the hell gives their life purpose and meaning. So next time you troll someone for following their passion, or simply seeking to better understand the world around them for a seemingly unreasonable price, just remember that you're nothing more than a bootlicking, useful idiot for your capitalist overlords. Finally, let's talk about one of the right's favorite talking points, liberal indoctrination. One of their top boogeymen these days is the progressive, lefty, liberal, Marxist professor. It is a fact that the overwhelming majority of university professors, or college professors if you're American, lean left, and many far left. And for some reason, butthurt conservatives and radical centrists see this as a serious problem. Serious. Now, for the simple explanation, I'm going to go ahead and cash in my phone a friend lifeline. Oh, there we go. Captain Obvious, long time no talk. Listen, I'm making a YouTube video about higher education, and I was hoping you could help me explain why professors are overwhelmingly liberal. Yeah, that seems pretty clear. Okay, thanks, I'll tell them. Alright, bye now. It's 'cause they're smart. The more you learn, the smarter you get, and the harder it is to hold on to dumb beliefs. That's why. Case closed. There's more to this, so let's dig in anyway. So a 2016 study confirmed that 60% of college professors identified as either liberal or far left. A 2011 survey found that just 14% identified as Republicans, and similarly, just 6% of members in the Academic Association for the Advancement of Science are Republicans. Science, the field of inquiry where one has to back up claims with sound methodology and evidence, and then submit it for peer review. Once again, 94% of the smartest humans whose quest for truth relies on the most vigorous possible methodology don't vote Republican. The people with the clearest possible understanding of the world do not vote Republican. To be counted as a scientist, you need a postgraduate degree. To earn a postgraduate degree, you have to be among the most intelligent, hardest working people in the population. Now this may come as a shock to you, but the higher the level of academic achievement earned, the more liberal you are. It's almost as if the more knowledge you accumulate, the more politically left you become. So what's happening is not liberal indoctrination, it's fact indoctrination. The more you know, the more you experience, and the more ideas you're exposed to, the more the world, its power structures, and its implicit ideologies become demystified. When you can finally see the puck in high definition, the old simplistic, ignorant, black and white, conservative capitalist narratives no longer make any sense. The logical consequence of exposure to science, philosophy, history, literature, and diversity is left, liberal, progressive politics. The logical consequence of ignorance is conservatism. Across cultures, we find conservatives value above all else in-group loyalty, obedience to authority, and purity. Wow, that sounds like Nazis already, geez. And when I say above all, I mean just that. You can dole out all the evidence, logic, and common sense in the world, but a true conservative will always vote Trump and against their interests, because it's their value system that dictates their behavior, not intellect. And sorry, but these are not the type of people we should be raising if we want a healthy democracy. That's just the way it is. If you don't like it, go kick rocks. But let's get back to liberal professors for a minute. The more widely accepted academic explanation for the liberal bias in universities comes down to a process of self-selection. In his book, Why Are Professors Liberal and Why Do Conservatives Care?, the sociologist Neil Gross tries to settle the debate over liberal bias in academia. Aside from confirming this liberal bias does exist, Gross also finds that the radical left has declined over the past 30 years, and that professors' politics don't usually affect their teaching, with most professors declaring that they cultivate neutrality. Now, are we going to take this at their word? Well, to test this, Gross performed a slightly sneaky but intriguing experiment, sending dummy letters to graduate programs asking for information, in some noting that the prospective student had worked for the McCain campaign, in some the Obama campaign, and in some no mention of political leaning at all. From the responses, he detects no bias at all. In contrast to the conservative narrative, most graduate programs are happy to take all applicants, regardless of party affiliation. He concludes that the study should count as reasonably strong evidence that most professors work hard to keep their political feelings and opinions from interfering with their evaluations of academic personnel. To explain why professors gravitate to the left, Gross turns to social psychology, speculating that the process works through self-selection, similar to the process that results in most nurses or elementary school teachers being women. If you are left-leaning, you are more likely to consider going to graduate school and becoming a professor, especially in the humanities and social sciences like anthropology and sociology. This logic seems circular. The stereotype reproduces the stereotype. But its significance is to dispel the charge that people experience ideological indoctrination in college. Rather, most people develop their political orientation during adolescence and then gravitate to a profession according to their predisposition. The liberal reputation of the professoriate stems from the late 19th and early 20th century, according to Gross, when the research university first emerged in the United States. Professors in the early American college customarily were ministers, but after the Civil War they increasingly became secular men of science, and some were affiliated with progressivism. This new breed of scholar prompted the first occurrence of the label liberal professor. The much more substantial historical shift took place in the period after World War II, during the great expansion of American universities. A professor was a rare species of professional a century ago, only numbering about 24,000 in 1900 and 40,000 in 1920, about 1/5 of the number of lawyers, but in the post-war era it became a common one, with over 300,000 by 1960 and 686,000 in 1980, about the same as lawyers. The post-war boom also changed the composition of the professoriate, opening it up to a much wider demographic mix than in the early part of the century, when professors were typically white Anglo-Saxon Protestants hailing from the comfortable classes. There were few Jewish professors, for instance, before World War II. This suggests a better explanation for the right's attention to professors. They represent the flourishing of post-war liberalism and the success of the new welfare state. Higher education was a form of social welfare that affected a wide swath of Americans and made the case for liberalism in a positive way, not just as a safety net in hard times, but as a bridge to a better society, or at least a ladder to help one ascend the class structure. This is why they fear the university. The success and democratization of the universities represents an existential threat to both capitalism and the conservative ideology that unwittingly supports it. Just like with the CIA in Latin America, there's nothing right-wingers hate more than the threat of a good example. Why do you think they're so desperate to cut funding and privatize education? It sure as hell isn't fiscal responsibility they're after. Otherwise, they'd raise taxes and cut military spending. They'll never admit this, and they may not even realize it. But ultimately what they're after is democracy itself. So comrades, go ahead and seize that subscribe button, as well as that notification bell. Thumbs up if you like the video. Thumbs down if you like the taste of boot soles, and you resent the liberal elite for telling you about facts, reason, empathy, and long-term planning. Bunch of wine-sipping, commie, pinko know-it-alls.